What were some of the maybe pivotal learnings for you? The things that either inflection points as an entrepreneur, the growing a firm, or maybe just challenges that you had to overcome?
Three things that starting a business is about stamina, staying resilient and buoyant. You may be down one day, you got to pop back up and keep that buoyancy.
This is the Leadership Foundry podcast. I'm your host this week, Brandon Smith. Today, I have the wonderful pleasure of bringing my friend and in many ways mentor, Glen Jackson, onto the show. We've had Glen on the Workplace Therapist podcast before, but today Glen's going to talk more specifically about leadership. And Glen is the co-founder of Jackson Spalding. It's a marketing communications agency with offices in multiple locations, 170 employees. It's an amazing firm. He serves some of the biggest companies and biggest brands, not only helping the brands and the companies communicate, but those leaders communicate more effectively. So listen close to Glen's story. Not only is he going to tell us some of the challenges and learnings he's had as a leader, but more importantly, some of the biggest challenges and opportunities for us as leaders today. Stay tuned. And of course, at the very end, I'll share all my highlights and notes. Glen, really excited to have you on the podcast today. Now, you've not the first time being on the podcast.
That's right. It was a few years ago.
You were on the Workplace Therapist podcast. So Leadership Foundry is a little different. Today, what I love about Leadership Foundry is we're going to talk about leadership, which is something that not only you have lived with your own business, but you coach leaders all the time on how to do this more effectively, particularly as it relates to communicating both internally and externally.
That's right.
So before I go too much further down the path, for those that haven't heard of your story before, maybe a good starting place. Tell us a little bit about your leadership journey. What ultimately got you to the seat you're sitting in today?
Well, we've been in business for 28 years. I started, co-founded Jackson Spalding when I was 31. Back in 1995, we feel like we're just getting started, but I really felt called to do it. I left a New York agency, had been there about 8 years, helping them lead their Atlanta office, and just had a prompting, a calling, you can call it whatever you want, and I just walked out the door with Bo Spalding, and we started Jackson Spalding back in 1995, and we're in our 28th year now.
So you were 31 when you started?
I was 31.
Now, was that something for those folks listening that have entrepreneurial endeavors, was that something you'd been thinking about for many, many years? Or was it just this kind of moment of calling or inspiration or purpose that just kind of seized you? What went into that move? Because that's a pretty bold leap. It's
not something that I was thinking about. It was just a spontaneous thought I had one day in the middle of a meeting. And it was a feeling that I can, with Bo Spalding and others, have a better way mindset about our business and create something that was independently owned. And I had lost my dad when I was 19, and Dad was in the communications business. So I felt like Dad was kind of with me, and I wanted to honor him. So I just threw the keys on the table and said, let's get after this. So we spent 8 months planning the business and then left and started Jackson Spalding. We now have almost 170 people, 4 offices, and we focus on 3 core services: public relations, digital, and creative.
So public relations, digital, and creative. So it can be everything from, what are examples? It can be everything from branding. Is it sometimes?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So public relations is about advancing and protecting reputation, first and foremost. And marketing is about driving revenue. They're not distant cousins, actually. So melding together marketing and public relations and integrating those two things is what we have strived to do at our agency, and our clients really want that, particularly now.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's been it's an interesting time to be a leader in business, because the pandemic really kind of shifted the chairs a little bit, and then everyone's trying to navigate not only their business models, but also what does it mean to be us?
Yes.
Identity questions, engagement questions,
culture
questions, even customer, how do we interface with customers? All those kinds of questions. So I want to ask you some pointed specific questions about what you see as leadership challenges today. But before we do that, when you think about your journey at Jackson Spalding, what were some of the maybe pivotal learnings for you? The things that either inflection points as an entrepreneur, the growing a firm, or maybe just challenges that you had to overcome?
Three things. That starting a business is about stamina, staying resilient and buoyant. You may be down one day, you got to pop back up and keep that buoyancy. Two is a healthy business is about everyone, Brandon, not someone. As has been said, teamwork makes the dream work. The esprit de corps of the team is so important. And the third thing is keep shaping the clay of your business all the time. Keep your entrepreneurial spirit burning. Constantly look for a better way to better serve your clients and the communities you're privileged to serve. Success is sweaty. It's not sexy. It's arduous, not glamorous. And it requires a lot of hard work. And you can also have a lot of fun as you do it.
It seems like of all those are challenging. But keeping that spirit burning, I bet that's got to be a challenge over 30 years. What are some ways that leaders can keep that fire lit? I was talking to a leader this week, and they said, I just don't enjoy this particular part of my job anymore. It's just I do it, but you could tell there wasn't a fire there.
Yeah.
How do you keep that going?
I treat every day as if we just opened our doors. We're in the freshness business. Chick-fil-A, a client of ours, has to serve a fresh sandwich every day. We've got to serve fresh thinking and strategy and execution fiercely.
I love that, Glen.
So we're in the freshness business too. And stay humble and hungry, gracious and ambitious, driven and dignified. Focus on what Jim Collins calls the genius of those ands, egoless and relentless. That keeps me motivated, and I'm obsessively focused on serving our clients with excellence.
That's great.
And that's where I go.
What role does curiosity play in that?
Essential.
Yeah?
Essential. Constantly be learning. Constantly be reading books and listening to podcasts to refine your leadership skills. And show your team you're constantly learning, because it'll then perpetuate them wanting to constantly learn. Leaders model to mold. They model the behavior around their team to mold them accordingly. And we have to demonstrate as a leader most effectively the values and purpose of the organization you started or you helped create.
I think that's so true. Now, I often hear leaders say, well, it's that kind of classic parenting statement where people will say, well, do what I say, but don't do what I do. I don't see that really working. It seems like what people really follow is what they see, those behaviors. Is that what you've experienced?
And it's more caught than taught, and we've got to lead by example.
Yeah.
And the best leaders I know realize that leadership growth leads to revenue growth too. So there's a direct correlation with the team growing as leaders will impact your revenue.
Yeah.
Because leadership growth leads to revenue growth. And I went around about 10 years ago and interviewed 12 people in Atlanta whom I really respect as leaders, and I asked them one question. You know what it was?
No.
How do you define leadership?
Oh, great question.
And I came up through that conversation with a crystallized definition of it.
Okay. Are you going to hit us with it? You have to hit us with it.
I'll share it.
You have to.
I'll share it. There's so many definitions about leadership, but this is what I heard,
yeah.
So I wrote it down. Leadership is the courage to act, and it's the commitment to complete each task by working with and inspiring others to deliver extraordinary results. The best leaders, to me, what I heard was they're not afraid to act.
Yeah.
and they work with their team, not have their teams work for them. And they also inspire. The best leaders inspire. You can be an introvert or an extrovert. It doesn't matter, but you're inspiring by the example you lead. And that leads to extraordinary results.
So I love the words in there. There's courage, commitment, working with others, inspiring results. Talk more about courage. What's an example of courage when either you've heard it from leaders or you've seen it? What's an example of a leader being courageous?
There's so many examples in Atlanta of courageous leadership. One of our clients that we worked for recently was the Atlanta Braves. They had the courage to move over to the Battery and take on this big vision of creating what's now the Battery and where the Braves play now. There's a lot of courage in that decision. In fact, when we were hired, they looked at me and said, "Welcome to our code name." You know what the code name was?
No.
Operation Intrepid.
Oh, really?
Because they knew it was going to require a lot of courage to do what they were doing, leaving Turner Field downtown and moving to Cobb County and building the Battery and the ballpark. So that's something I saw through their actions. They had the courage to act.
Yeah.
And a lot of leaders had the courage to start a new idea, take on a new part of their business, and let's try to scale it. It's just different examples.
Yeah. It's a great example of doing things differently.
Yeah.
The courage.
Upstream as well.
Yeah.
Eschewing the path of least resistance.
And that can be hard when you're a leader of, say, a large, well-established, publicly traded company that has a long history.
Yeah.
It's the currents would say well, just do what we've always done. Do what's kind of kept us successful.
Yeah. And I wanted, when I left the New York agency, I wanted to look back and say to myself, when I'm 80, I did have the courage to act. Because when we resigned, when faxed back then, our letters of resignation.
Oh, you faxed them?
Yeah, faxed them. Nice. I was holding in my hand my dad's dog tag from World War II, and he landed on D-Day, the largest seaborne military invasion in history. And I had that dog tag with me because I knew this was going to require a lot of courage and a lot of risk to take something on and try to build something from scratch. The best leaders are builders, they're transformers, and they're visionaries.
Yeah. I have experienced, this isn't always true, so I don't want to leave a blanket statement, but I've experienced entrepreneurs, in many cases, almost end up with more humility as they get older, because they just have learned a lot of life lessons, and a lot of mistakes that they had to kind of pivot from. Was that your experience as a leader?
Yeah, absolutely.
It teaches you humility.
It's very humbling, almost every day.
Yeah, there's often many times I've thought, oh, this is where I want to take the brand, or this is the right answer. I go in to lead a committee, and everyone says, "No, Brandon, you are wrong." Yeah. And I said, glad I asked before I made a mistake.
Humility is important to the leadership journey.
Yeah.
Because when you get arrogant, watch out.
Yeah. Yeah.
That can destroy you very quickly.
So let's pivot a little bit.
Okay.
So what I love, for everyone listening, I've known you for a long time, and I've just, every time we get together, I learn something. Not only in your own journey and what you've built and developed and the way you've done it in such a values-driven way, but also with all the leaders you serve, because you're on the front lines of helping leaders manage some of the complexity of the world today, whether we talk about internal communications with employees or how to more effectively connect with customers.
Yes.
So here we are, as we're recording this today in 2023. We've come out of the pandemic, but there's still a lot of, uncertainty or redefining landscapes and business models. What do you see? It's a long set of Glen. So what do you see as some of the challenges your clients face today, at least at a general level, and what leaders face today? What are some of those big challenges?
I think getting their culture back is something that companies are striving to regain post-pandemic still.
Yeah.
How are we navigating our hybrid work environment now? A lot of the leaders we work with are constantly striving to become better communicators, particularly with their internal audience, their employees. And leaders whom we work with are really trying to get out more and see their clients, see their community, advocates. Outside equals inside to me. When you get outside to see people, particularly now, you're going to bring opportunities inside your business. So outside equals inside, and I think the best leaders we're working with now understand that. And they're navigating tough issues too. I mean, we represent Norfolk Southern, and after the derailment, Alan Shaw has led beautifully to help East Palestine get back on his feet, not only get through what they went through with that derailment, but to thrive. And seeing Alan lead has been incredibly inspirational for me. Yeah. So there's just a lot going on right now. Use technology too as a tool, not as a crutch, by the way. I think culture is created in circles, not squares. We gotta see the project. We got to see the person. We got to show up for our friend, show up for our team leader, and we also need to share what we're learning. Sharing is caring. Let's share a lot.
Yeah.
Our stories, our hurts, our failures, our things that we're striving to get to work on. The best leaders are authentic, of course. God's favorite color is transparency.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to dig into one of those. I had a call with an executive I was talking to yesterday. He's going to come on a future podcast.
Okay.
And I had the pleasure of doing 360 interviews for this leader. And he got a compliment that I thought was one of the best compliments any CEO could get today, but I'm not sure what it means. So I'm going to give it to you for your own personal definition of what you think this means.
Okay.
But this was the compliment. The person said, "This leader is such a modern CEO." They called him a modern CEO, and in a very complimentary way. He's just modern. He's just like relevant for the times. So when you think about that phrase, modern,
wow.
what does it mean to be?
That's the first time I've heard it.
What does it mean? So what's your first reaction? I mean, we're kind of shaping this together, right? But when you think about the picture of a modern CEO, someone who's kind of got she or he's got all the tools necessary to lead in the world today, what would be some of those things that they would need to lean into or embrace from your perspective?
They're real, they're relatable, they listen, they're humble, and they work with everyone as a team player.
Yeah.
I think today's modern CEO understands that they don't have all the answers, but together we can find out that answer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So less of kind of this, I hold all the answers, I'm the big authority figure, I make all the decisions. So they still need to be decisive, but it's almost like they're master facilitators in many ways. Like they know how to pull the best thinking out of a room.
I think they also instill trust. They share about their failures and lessons learned. They're just a normal human being, and they're visible too, and not somewhere up on the 12th floor.
So you've been kind of hinting at something in this picture of both challenges that leaders face today, but also that your great definition on the fly of a modern CEO, that effective leaders today need to learn how to be more comfortable with vulnerability.
Yes.
So what are some examples of that maybe you've already said that you want to maybe reinforce, but what does it mean to be comfortable with vulnerability, and why is that hard for leaders?
I think they think that that they may be seen as weak if they share some of that vulnerability. What you got to realize is it actually makes you stronger when you do.
Yeah.
We've all been through a lot in the last few years as a society, and I think when we can be open and honest with the people we're working with and leading, it just makes you more human and leads to better results. And in many ways, that's the courage to act too. Courage to act is also
Yeah.
sharing what's going on and what you're struggling with.
Yeah.
That's important.
And putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
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 It's interesting. I was reading an interview with the new CDC director, and they were talking about one of the things that she highlighted was she said, we really need to work on rebuilding trust. And they said, well, tell me more about that. And she said, well, I think in an effort to try and have the country and beyond feel very assured, we might have been a little too not decisive, but more, and not authoritative, but just kind of said, this is what's going on, when we actually didn't have all the information. So rather than coming out and saying, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, based on this, we think this is the right path, we just tried to create more of a black and white, and then when things changed and then we went back on that damaged trust. So it was almost like she was saying, similar to what you're saying, that had we led maybe with a little more, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, we're going to figure this out together.
Yeah.
It might
Good for her.
It might have played a little bit better in the time. But you can see why leaders felt like people look to us for the answer, and we feel like we have to deliver it.
Yeah. This year, earlier, I identified about 20 words that end in ATE. I like words, and these words, to me, these 20 or so words capture what I think the best leaders do. And some of them, they're about. I've identified a few just to share this morning, kind of relate to your story.
Yeah.
The best leaders, they delegate, it ends in ATE. They're not afraid to delegate responsibilities. The opposite of delegation is domination. Don't dominate, delegate. So they delegate. 2, they celebrate. They celebrate with their teams the good things that are happening. Frank Blake would always ask whenever he went to Home Depots when he was CEO, when he walked in, he would ask the leader, what are we celebrating?
Nice.
3 is they appreciate. They appreciate people. Another one is they anticipate well. They see around corners. They've got really good anticipatory thinking, so they anticipate. They cultivate. They cultivate relationships. And they marinate, Brandon. They marinate.
Oh, that's a good one.
They sleep on decisions. They give it to the sleep committee, and they marinate on things.
I've never heard that before.
Give
it to the sleep committee.
They also radiate's another one, positivity.
That's good too.
So they radiate. And those are some things that on those ATE words I see, and there are actually 5 on the opposite end that you don't want to do.
There are also the ATE words.
Yes.
Okay, so what are some of those? The watch outs.
Manipulate. Don't manipulate.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. 2 is one we just mentioned. Don't dominate. Don't dominate meetings. Don't dominate discussions. Don't dominate people. 3 is don't deflate.
Oh, yeah.
Don't deflate others. Build them up.
Yeah.
4 is obfuscate. Complicated word to say. Obfuscate.
Everyone listening to this has to look that up.
Yeah.
Right now.
Figure out how to spell that. Confuse. Don't confuse. So those are some of the ones to be careful with on the ATE side on the don't do's.
Beautiful. Love that. Glenn, this is awesome. This has been an incredible conversation. I mean, I've got 2 pages already of rich stuff. So I always ask all my guests this question on the Leadership Foundry podcast.
Yeah.
What is one kind of practical thing leaders can start doing today that will make them more effective and make their teams even better?
Ah, gosh.
So what's that? If there was one big thing, like people were listening to this today, and you'd say, listen, above all else, start doing this. What would be that thing?
One thing that I would tell people is remember what your P&L truly stands for.
Okay. All right.
All right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you immediately think of profit and loss, our profits and losses. But here's the other P&L that you need to focus on right now, particularly now.
Okay.
People and lives. And if we can focus on people and lives and make that our P&L too, for any business, large or small, you will see great things happen. over time.
Beautiful. So if people want to learn more about you, follow you, buy a copy of your first book, Preeminence, where can they go?
Just go on our website at jacksonspalding.com, and there's information about us there, and they can peruse around that.
Beautiful. Thank
you for having me this morning.
Thank you, my friend.
It's wonderful being with you.
It's always good to be with you. Thank you for sharing all of your brilliant insights. And what I love about our time, in addition to all the great insights, is you have this masterful way of saying everything with a rhythm to it.
Oh.
You have just this nice kind of way of saying, just tying things in using words, but then have a nice rhythm and rhyme, which allows us to remember it better. So I know that even though I took 2 pages of notes, every listener came away with something, and probably something different from the interview today. And that's
I
a
value
great
our
gift.
friendship, and you inspire me to be better.
Well,
So
thank you, my friend. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
I loved my conversation with Glen. I mean, he covered so much ground and gave us so many beautiful nuggets that I'm not going to do the summary justice. But there are a few things I want to hone in on as a reminder and refresher for us. Glen spent some time about halfway into our conversation really outlining some of the challenges that modern leaders face today. And he really gave us 5. So here they are. He says, we've really got to be thinking about how we bring our culture back and really how we nurture that. We're going to be thinking about how we can become better communicators and maybe even ways to not only show up as authentic, but also make sure we're using technology. He said we want to increase the visibility of leaders, increase our visibility, make sure we're out there with customers, team members, that we're seeing them. We're not waiting for them to come to us. We need to go to them. We're leading through adversity. All businesses and organizations are dealing with something today, and the best leaders are navigating those waters well. And then he ended with, of course, reminding us to be authentic, which was such a beautiful way to summarize it all. So there's many, many more nuggets. I'm sure you have your own favorites. Whatever you found, find that one thing you either want to start doing, stop doing, or continue doing to not only make you a better leader today, but a better leader for you and your teams starting tomorrow.